Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Anita Bruzzese in St. Louis, Missouri. Anita is an award-winning journalist with more than 25 years of experience. She's an author, columnist, and blogger focused on career and workplace issues. Anita has written for numerous publications, including USA Today, and has appeared on the Today Show as a career expert. She's also been interviewed as an expert for O, the Oprah magazine, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, and Shape. In addition, she's written 2 books, Take This Job and Thrive, and 45 Things That Drive Your Boss Crazy and How to Avoid Them, named a top 10 most notable business book for 2007 by the New York Post and Amazon.com. Anita, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm so glad you're here because you have such a wide sort of array of experience with regards to, job seeking and doing well at work. But as I mentioned, one of the things that you focus on is things that you do to annoy your boss and how to avoid them. I notice you've written about that quite a bit in addition to your book. But what do you think are some of the top things that are issues that people are doing to annoy their boss today?
You know, I was thinking about this question over the last couple of days, and I really think it comes down to it's often communication issues. And that's a huge scope of things, but let me kind of break that down. Say, for example, your boss calls you into his or her office, and you go in there and, the boss is giving you instructions and, yada, 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 it's due by this date, and you're just nodding your head. And the whole time the boss is thinking, why are you not writing this down? I know that I'm going to have to repeat this to you. And, it's true. How many times have you gone in a restaurant and the server comes up to you and there's 12 people at your table and the person refuses to write a word down that they're saying? It's like some kind of test of their memory. Mm-hmm. And, more often than not, something is wrong. And the boss feels the same way. If the boss says, come into my office, take a notepad and a pencil or a pen. Same thing. If, for example, the boss gives you instructions and you're not absolutely clear what you're supposed to be doing, then you need to communicate that to the boss, either with a follow-up email or a follow-up meeting. It drives bosses crazy when they have to repeat what they've said because either you didn't ask questions the first time to get a good grasp of what was going on, or you didn't write it down, or you didn't put it on your calendar, or, for example, they tell you something and you're supposed to inform other members of your team and you fail to do that. That's why I say communication skills are so underrated, especially in schools. For example, you have people getting engineering degrees, science degrees. Those people start out making $80,000 a year, and they can't write an email to save their soul. They can't take notes in a meeting. They can't write a note to their boss explaining what's going on. And so you're brilliant, and you're making $80,000 to $90,000 a year, but eventually you start getting written up because you're making the boss have to repeat his or her steps or words or works.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I actually had dinner with a big group of friends on Sunday night, and I think there were maybe like 15 people there, and the server refused to write down the orders. He was going to remember them, and he ended up coming back with the wrong food for a few people, and for one person, he brought the order for them 3 times, literally. And everyone was like, why didn't he just write this stuff down,
Right.
And it's funny that you mentioned engineering. My undergrad is actually engineering, and one of the things I think that helped me to excel in the business world was that I could communicate better than my peers in terms of I took notes and things. And so I totally agree. There's definitely a disconnect there. Are there any other issues that you think, aside from communication issues, that are that really stick out in terms of big?
I think the other one is preparation. I think that too many times bosses get frustrated in meetings or meeting with a client or whatever, and you're not prepared. And that a lot of that goes into the communication part of it because you haven't clearly communicated with the boss, do I have everything I need? Do I need to ask the boss for more information, being prepared? A lot of this dovetails into the soft skills, that it can be very frustrating. You can be so bright, but if you cannot communicate your ideas well in a meeting because you've gone in there unprepared with your notes, or you haven't prepared how to concisely, reveal your idea or your insights, it can be very frustrating for bosses. And the sad truth is, you might be brighter and better than a coworker, but if that coworker is better at communicating ideas, at communicating with the boss, at communicating with team members, chances are very good that person is going to get ahead faster than you are.
Mm-hmm. No, that's totally true. And I do see people who feel very frustrated because they say, I'm smarter, I'm more talented. What's the deal? Why is this other person who's not as smart as me, why are they getting ahead? And I think you're right. The other person may just be a better communicator.
Right. And that's why I think if you're, say, for example, in engineering and you're finding this to be true, take a Toastmasters class. Mm-hmm. Listen to podcasts like this. Take an improv class. Do something where you are called on to speak in front of others so that you become more comfortable giving your ideas. Even if you consider yourself an introvert, you can do readings at your church or synagogue. You can volunteer at community events where you're asked to explain a process to school children. Something where you have to communicate your ideas, even if you start out with small baby steps. That is the best investment you can make in your career.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with you. And I love your suggestion about taking an acting class. I actually did that some time back, and it was terribly, terribly painful because I'm not an actor at all, but I did it to help, bring out sort of my speaking skills, and it was very, very helpful with regards to that. Now, I'll never be an actor, but it was ultimately really helpful. I think that's a very creative way to sort of bring yourself out a little bit. So you have a blog. I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, but it's called 45things.com, and it's the number 45, the word things.com. And you talk about the concept on your blog of reverse mentoring, which I think is really great and interesting and kind of new. Can you talk a little bit about what it is and how, it might be beneficial to someone to actually give it a shot?
Well, reverse mentoring has kind of been informal for many years, but I think it's becoming a more formalized process. And I also think that works better when it is that way, when HR gets involved and they kind of set these programs up. And really what that is, say, for example, you're, mid-career, maybe your early 40s, late 30s, you've gotten into the leadership ranks, you're moving right along. But a lot of things are passing you by. You didn't get on board with Facebook or Twitter. You have no clue how to, tweet or anything like that. Or if you do tweet, nobody seems to follow you. You can't figure it out. Why aren't not people not liking me on Facebook? Or there's been a lot of technology changes or technology shortcuts that other people are getting work done faster than you because you don't understand them. Well, so you have these younger workers who are coming up through the ranks. They are maybe more proficient in some of this technology. Maybe tweeting to them is second nature. They know how to use Pinterest and they know how to use Facebook and, all those kind of things that seem to kind of elude you. They have, 100,000 followers and you don't get it. The way the reverse mentoring works is that you get together with this younger person and they say, I can teach you about social media. I can teach you what gets the clicks. I can teach you what interests people, and how to get a following. I can teach you these technology shortcuts. If, in turn, you could kind of help me navigate some of the workplace issues I have. I'm having trouble getting along with a coworker. I want to get into management. Who do I need to talk to? How do I ask for a raise? How do I go for a promotion? All those things you've learned because you're older and more advanced in your career. So that's kind of how reverse mentoring works. You are mentored by the younger person, and yet they glean a lot of knowledge and insight from you as well. Doesn't have to last forever. Maybe it's just a short 6-month period, something like that. But the point is to expose yourself to someone who has skills that you don't have and that you want to develop. And that's where reverse mentoring comes into play.
No, that's great. So how would you recommend that someone go about initiating this kind of a reverse mentoring relationship?
Well, first I would talk to HR and see if they don't have something already in place, because a lot of companies are very interested in this. I mean, this is a really cheap way to get people training. You're not having to hire any outside consultants, and you don't have to send people to classes. You just pair them up with people who have the knowledge they have. So even if HR isn't involved, they may jump on board, with both feet and be very excited about it. If not, look around your workplace. Is there somebody that you see is very proficient at social media, or has a technology skill you would like to learn, and just approach them like as you would any mentor. Take them out to coffee, just be very casual about it and say, I noticed that you have such and such a skill, and I'm very interested in that. Is there a way we could meet and you could kind of walk me through this? Look over my shoulder as time goes on, tell me what I'm doing right and doing wrong, and see how the relationship unfolds. Maybe they'll say to you, hey, that's great. I notice in meetings you're always able to get your ideas across. Can you teach me how to do something similar? And then you say, this doesn't have to be a forever relationship. Let's see how it works for the next several weeks and go from there.
Oh, that's a great idea. I mean, I really think there are a lot of young people that are really looking for this kind of mentoring but aren't sure where to begin. And I've even had clients who feel uncomfortable asking for help because they feel like they're not giving anything in return. But especially for a younger person, this kind of, gives them something that they could give back. So
right.
It's great to really create that two-way relationship. Well, another thing that I noticed on your blog is that you talk about sort of the importance of being popular at work and how it can kind of impact you over time. And sometimes we really underestimate the importance of, having people like you in your workplace. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the role that being popular plays in your career and why it's important?
Well, I think when I'm talking about popular, I'm not talking about, high school popular, like, I'm the most popular kid and I'm the cheerleader and I'm the homecoming king and those kind of things. What I'm talking about at work being popular is you're approachable.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. Often when opportunities come up at work, the question goes out, well, who do we have who can do such and such? People think of who's on the top of their head, right? You and I both do this. They'll say, do you know somebody who can do X, Y, Z? And you go, let me think. Who pops to mind is people that you're familiar with, people that you've had interactions with. And that's what I'm talking about being popular. Even if you're the most introverted person, you can still be popular. You are the person who sends emails to somebody if you're very introverted and you say, by the way, that presentation you gave was dynamite. I got so much out of this. But I came across this article, and you might also find this helpful. Being popular means that you're top of mind because you're there. You're not overbearing. You're not sitting on somebody's desk, gabbing away the day, driving them crazy. But you're seen as helpful. You're seen as, somebody who's got their back. You're there. You're available to help them out of a pinch. That's what I mean about being popular. And, you want to be top of mind because when people stop thinking about you is when you are in trouble. Either your boss stops thinking about you or coworkers start, forgetting about you. You might as well start writing your resume. That is the quickest way to get yourself out of a job.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so true. And I think, you're right. It's more than just doing your job day to day. It's, like you said, being helpful. And when you take the time to actually send someone an article or something that might, help them, not a lot of people do that. So when you do take the time, it stands out.
Right.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I think a lot of people do overlook that issue. So I'd like to move on to sort of job seeking because that's really sort of my favorite topic. And one of my favorite areas within job seeking is career fairs. When I was in both college and graduate school, I was fortunate to be near national career fairs, which often had like 300 to 350 different employers that all had booths. And so I spent a lot of time going through these fairs, and I found them really super helpful. But, not everybody has had that sort of experience. And I was wondering if you can kind of give us a little bit of information about how to prepare for a career fair and how they can be helpful to you.
Well, I think you just said the key word, which is prepare. You'd be surprised how many people show up at a job fair and they've stopped and got a Dunkin' Donuts and a cup of coffee and the newspaper, and they kind of stroll in and they're in their jeans and their sweatshirt, and that's not being prepared. That's, basically just taking up space. When you go to a job fair, they publish beforehand who's going to be there. So you research those companies. What does that company do? What's their culture like? You can find out so much information not only through a company website, but you have sites like Glassdoor.com, which gives employee perspectives on a place to work. You can go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, you can go on all those social media sites and look at the company and what they're tweeting about and what they're talking about. This helps you learn the culture of these kind of companies. Because when you go up to this job fair, it really can be very loud in those places. It can be rushed. You're, juggling all this information. So if you can go up and ask specific questions about the employer, I noticed on your website such and such. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or I noticed, in some of your tweets that you're developing this new product. Well, I have specific experience in that kind of production. Mm-hmm. There you go. You're a lot further along than going up and sticking out your sticky hand with Dunkin' Donuts on it and handing them a resume. That's what I talk about. Preparation is really key, because it's always the person who's more prepared, can ask more pointed questions. That makes you memorable, and that's what you want, because they're going to be looking at possibly hundreds of faces that day, and the person who knows about the company can tell that company what I can do for you and makes that kind of impression. You will be the one of 100 that will stand out to them.
Oh, I totally agree. And you made a really good point about the way that you dress for a career fair. At many career fairs, everyone who shows up, they wear business suits. And I've seen situations before where someone has never been to a career fair and they showed up a little bit too casual, and they really stuck out and were memorable for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And
right. And I know when the economy went bad, the nightly news was constantly showing job fairs, people at job fairs. And I have to tell you, a lot of people were dressed correctly. They were dressed in their suits. They were dressed correctly. And then you would get to that person with that crazy hairstyle. Half of it was blue, half of it was red, chomping on gum, talking on the phone. And it was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look around. Do you not get a clue? There's so much good advice out there that, to me, I just don't understand people who go in unprepared. Mm-hmm. It's like showing up for a final exam and you haven't been to class all year. Do you honestly think you're going to pass? No. Mm-hmm. You've known this since you were a kid, so don't try and ignore it in the workplace.
Yeah, and so many of the resources that are available online are free. So, yes. It's easy to get your hands on, what would be the right thing to do. I think also in preparation for career fairs, many fairs will list actual jobs for specific companies that you can apply mm-hmm. to in advance. So that can be, another thing to do. And then afterward, I always recommend, that my clients get the contact information of the recruiters that they talk to and try to follow up with them after the fair as well.
Oh, absolutely, because it goes back to that old thing. There's so many people that won't. If you do, you're going to stand out. And the other thing I would suggest, if you're going to see actual jobs or job descriptions, study those. Use some of that language, because people like to hear their own words come back at them. So if there's specific things listed in that job description, specific skills that you have, make sure you use those words as well. And that fosters a sense of familiarity with you. It's like, oh, this person gets it. Mm-hmm. I see that she understands we need these certain skills. I see that she's worked in this kind of culture before. And that's always helpful. All the little things you can do can really add up to make a difference and make you more memorable.
Yes, because like you said, they look at hundreds of faces in one day, and you need to stand out for good reasons.
Right.
So I mentioned to you that we're recording this podcast a little early. It probably won't actually post for another week or so. But today is actually Veterans Day, and so I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about some of the issues that veterans face. And in my own coaching practice, I work with a couple of veterans who are transitioning from being in the military to trying to get a civilian job, and they really have gone through a lot of struggles and sort of difficulties in making that transition. I'd love to get your perspective on any advice that you would have for those in the military that are leaving and are trying to transition into the civilian work world.
Well, I think, let me start out with some good news for a change. I just saw a study by Career Builder that said a third of employers are actively recruiting veterans. These are mostly for the science, technology, engineering, math jobs, because veterans often have those kind of skills they want. But that's much better numbers than they've been in a while. That being said, there still are plenty of employers out there who don't really get what a military person has done. There's a whole different language in military life than there is in private industry. And the people who come out of the military tell me, they read the job descriptions and they don't even understand what they mean, because none of those job descriptions describe what they did. But yet, if they dig deeper and they get a little bit more educated about it, they start to see the parallels, and that's the key. The other key is, the military need to learn to tap into their networks. There's a lot of employers who have a military person that they've hired. That is the person you want to go to. That is the connection you want to make, because they will help you out. They will help you break into those ranks. They will help you call human resources. They will help you make those connections, as well as they will help you translate your military skills into the private sector. There's a number of websites that they can use. There's Afterburner. There's Rally Point. Those are all really good ones that military personnel can go to not only be educated as to how to look for a job, but also help them make connections. I urge them to become active on LinkedIn. They will find a lot of connections. They can join groups with former military. That can also help open doors for them.
That's really good advice. I think you mentioned translating their military skills for sort of the private sector on their resume. I think that's really important, because sometimes when I've sat down with a client and I've reviewed their resume and they've been in the military, I don't know what it means.
Right.
And so, if I don't know, the chances that human resources or whoever at this new company where they're applying, they probably are not going to know either.
Right. And that's where networking pays off, because now you've had enough returning military from active duty go in that if you can find some active military people to help you, either through LinkedIn or they're already at these companies, or like I said, these job sites, they can help you understand what transferable skills you have. You'll have, for example, a military person say, and I'm not that familiar with all these military terms, but basically they had a lot of leadership roles in what they did. Well, of course, companies need those leadership roles, but companies are clueless as to what these job descriptions are that they did in the military. For all they know, they drove a tank, and that was it. They have some far-out notions of what these military people are doing, whereas the military person may have been critically responsible for moving thousands of troops or supplies and setting up, supply chains, and maybe a company's looking for exactly that, but they don't understand that from looking at military terms. They're still going to think you just drove a tank. They're still not going to get it. So military people really have to do their homework and learn how to translate those terms so that a civilian employer will understand it. And they also need to tap into that network. That network is so critical for helping you get into a company, because they can kind of serve as a translator for you. They can kind of serve as a liaison. And I want to say one last thing. In my research of, hiring military, there is a belief by a lot of civilian employers that these veterans are all suffering from PTSD, that they're going to go, off sometime. Many veterans do have some form of PTSD, and sometimes it's so mild you could barely detect it. Sometimes they need medication. But a lot of employers are under the mistaken belief that the veterans are somehow mentally unstable.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to look for ways, if you think that's what an employer is worried about, talk about that elephant in the room. If you feel like they're kind of saying some questions, but, how do you handle stress, that kind of thing, which there's legal boundaries what they can and cannot ask. But, if you feel like that's the elephant in the room, go ahead and address that. Go ahead and say, I've learned to handle my stress. I'm very much into mindfulness. I do yoga. I found that's great. I think that I've learned to handle stress really well and, go on with it. But I just think veterans should be aware that is in the back of the mind of a lot of civilian employers.
No, I think that's a great point. I've had multiple clients who have a military background that said that they have felt discriminated during the interview process because they felt like they were kind of discounted for being in the military when they truly expected that employers would really appreciate it. That's kind of
right.
what they had been told, and so it was surprising to them.
Yeah, and it's, and it's a blow. It's so demoralizing, I think, to have to deal with something like that. But the sooner you learn to deal with it and kind of, find a way to address it in a really positive way, it's just like anything else when you go into an interview and maybe something negative comes out. The quicker you deal with that and learn to spin it to a positive, the better.
Absolutely.
And so that's just one of your skills you need to learn to handle.
Absolutely. The last thing I think I want to point out on this topic, you mentioned both networking, using your network, and you also mentioned some resources that are available for people to reach out to. I think that's really important to consider because when folks come out of the military, often they go through I don't know if it's a class or they go through some kind of training.
Yeah, no, they do as they leave.
Right.
Yeah.
It's given by the military, and they're told, this is what you need in order to, you're going to be prepared to get a civilian job. And the folks that I've talked to, after they go through that training, they were assuming that they were prepared, and they were surprised to find that they really weren't prepared.
Right.
That I don't know if the training, maybe they just need additional training, but I think encouraging people to be proactive and to not be, too hard on themselves that, hey, that one class that the military gave you, it may not have been enough. So
exactly.
It's time to sort of take things into your own hands and look for resources and, just keep moving forward rather than just assuming that it's you or that you've done something wrong.
Well, and I would urge anyone who is still in the military and looking to get out soon or in the next year or so, they need to start now.
Mm-hmm.
They need to start now, reaching out to the network, becoming educated, because like you said, they get that one class and it's like, see you later, you're on your own now. Well, in the military, things are very structured. They know what they're supposed to do next, and they're kind of cast out into the world, and especially in a world that's had a very tough job market. And so there's so many people willing to help veterans that they will go out of their way. I personally have never heard of a veteran calling and asking for help and they said, "Oh, sorry, you're on your own." People want to help,
right.
But you're going to have to step up and you're going to have to reach out and you're going to have to make those phone calls and you're going to have to send those emails and you're going to have to tap in to those people willing to help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think those are all just really great points. So on to a new topic. I found an example on your website that I really enjoyed. Many candidates, when they go to a job interview, face what we could call a creative interview questions.
The salad dressing question.
Right. And on your
what
website...
What kind of salad dressing are you?
Yeah, if you were a salad, what kind of salad dressing would you be? And I've had clients who come to me and say, that was the worst question ever. Why did they ask me that? So can you kind of break it down for us and explain,
Well, it kind of started out with the startups and the tech companies. It was, if you could be a salad dressing, what kind would you be? Or, goofy questions like that. And it caught on with a lot of people going, ooh, we can be the next Google if we'll just ask those really stupid questions, And so, and then hiring managers, just, I don't know, maybe they got bored with asking the standard questions and decide to start asking this. What they say is, when you say, well, why do you ask such questions? They will say, well, we want to know how a candidate thinks. It's more to observe your critical thinking skills. Personally, I think some of them are just to try and trip up a candidate. I don't think they're necessarily fair. Some of them are good. Some of them are a little creative. Talk to me about a time, something or other. But I just think that the key to these kind of questions is not getting flustered, is or not getting angry, because that may be something they're looking for. Does this person just become unraveled if we ask something kind of strange? Will they get angry with a client who asks a weird question? That kind of thing. So just try and keep your equilibrium about you and just say, that's a really interesting question, and that's got to be the first time I was asked that today, and and just try and do the best you can. The key is they might throw you for a loop with that one, but the other ones, you can come through on. Now, I will say, if you're in there and this person is doing nothing but throwing you these Fruit Loop questions the whole time, you may want to rethink this company anyway.
Right.
That may be a sign to you, okay, if this is what they want to spend their time doing and they don't seriously want to consider my skills and what I can bring to this job, maybe this isn't the best fit for me.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, though. I think they pose these questions and say that they want to see how you think, and sometimes they do. But I think it's often, like you said, to see if they can trip you up, to see if they can ruffle your feathers while you're there.
Right. So the key is to just tell yourself before you go in, if you are prepared to answer other things and you've done your homework and you've practiced and you're ready, then everything else will go smoothly, and maybe there's that one blip in the road, but as long as you don't let it, send you over the edge, then you're good. And if you're prepared, you should be okay. You should feel confident going in.
Absolutely. I used to interview a lot just because I really enjoyed it when I was younger. And I think the one interview question I received that was kind of similar to this in a way with the same purpose in mind was I went into the interview room and the interviewer handed me a dry erase marker and said, I'll be back in 5 minutes. You're going to pitch me on you. Here's a whiteboard. See you later.
Yeah.
And that's a little different, but the idea was they really wanted to see, could I keep calm and, what would I do under this kind of pressure? Right.
Sell him that dry eraser, or, that's what they'll do. They'll hand you a pencil and say, sell me the pencil, that kind of thing. So, you might get some of those questions, and that's okay as long as you're prepared. That one question is not going to sink your whole interview as long as you're prepared for the rest of it.
Another similar type of question I've seen is sometimes employers will ask you like a math question that's a little tricky, and they'll ask you to answer it in front of an audience, basically, in front of a panel of interviewers. And I think that's another situation where my recommendation would be for the person to just keep calm, because there's a good chance you may not get the right answer to the math question, but that is really a situation where they want to see your thought process and see how close you can get.
Right. That old grace under pressure thing is, a lot of workplaces are real pressure cookers these days, because even though the economy is improving, they are not rehiring the number of bodies they laid off, which means everybody is pulling a pretty big load. And that means that there's going to be some stress and some tension, and that's what they're looking for. They don't want somebody who's going to fly off the handle and upset the whole apple cart at work. They want somebody who can seamlessly fit in and, kind of be that grace under pressure.
Absolutely. So when it comes to interviews, what are some of the things that someone should never say in an interview?
Well, it depends on where you are in the interview process. For example, I know that employers get very irritated in the initial, interviewing phase when you're asking about, well, how many vacation days do I get, and what's my health insurance, and will I have an office, and do you have flex time because I have a kid and I'm going to need time off. If you're much more interested in the perks instead of, what you would be doing, that is not something you bring up. That is something in the very final stages when they're getting ready to offer it to you. You can ask more specific questions about those kind of things. That's legitimate there. But I think what you want to do is you want to gear all your questions around, the company, its culture. What will I be doing in this job? What would a day in this job look like for me? How, where's my role in this, with the team? That's the kind of thing they want to know about. They want to see that you've done your homework and you're not saying to them, so what is it this company does? Now, I actually know people who've done that. What is it this company does? Well, what is that? Okay, well, are there enough days off I can go surfing or what? That kind of thing. That's not what you want to do. They expect you to get online and look them up. They expect you to read their website. They expect you to understand, if they mention a name and you go, well, who the heck is that? And it's the CEO. Yeah, that's not a good idea. You need to know the key players. You need to know, what the competition is for them, what some of their concerns are, what the industry is going through. You need to be informed enough that you don't ask the really, stupid basic questions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think the thing along those lines is all this information is very easy to find.
Right.
It's very quick. And, the job market itself is very, there's a lot of competition right now. And if you're the only candidate who clearly did not do their homework, even if you're smarter in some other ways, they want to see that you're a hard worker and that you're going to take the time to look them up in advance.
Right. And let's say, for example, you don't really know how to look someone up or you really don't, you're just clueless about it. Go to your local library.
Mm-hmm.
Your local library, those librarians are so smart, and they can sit down with you and show you how to look up information on a company. They can show you the resources that are available. If you're just not sure and you're not comfortable with that, that's okay. There's people there that can help you, and that's their job. And get yourself to a public library, and they will help you find the information you need.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you mentioned that questions about vacation and benefits should not be asked in the beginning. I mean, I totally agree, because at that point, the company doesn't really know you. They haven't decided if they even want to interview you again. So you want to avoid questions that are, like you said, they're very self-serving, and they're less about what you can do for the company and more about what the company can do for you.
Exactly.
So you want to really refocus, like you said. Well, occasionally I'll work with a job seeker who's had an interview that just goes terrible. I mean, something happened and they come into my office and say, oh my gosh, I was really excited, but it was just a disaster. Do you have any tips to help those people that are in that situation to kind of make the best of it after they've had a bad interview?
Well, I would suggest a follow-up. You're gonna write a follow-up thank you note anyway. And if you feel like there was something where you were misunderstood, or you feel like you really stuck your foot in your mouth, something like that, you can address that when you follow up. Say, and in regards to such and such, I hope I made myself clear that I really think, X, Y, Z, and that's how you deal with that. And sometimes you can't make the best situation of it. Sometimes you're just going to have to chalk it up to a learning experience and move on. Don't beat yourself up over it. You learned a lesson and you'll move on. You won't do it next time.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I actually tell a lot of my clients that you want to think of an interview as practice. You want to take the pressure off yourself, and if it goes badly, you're just going to be that much more prepared for the next one. I mean, you can't get hung up on it.
Right.
Well, is there any other advice? I mean, I know you cover a lot of different topics. Is there any other advice that you'd like to offer for our listeners today?
No, that's just really it. Always remember that information is power, and the more information you have, the better off you'll be.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, how can listeners contact you if they're interested to learn more about your book? Or
www.45things.com is the best way. My blog's on there. My contact information is on there. I'm always open to questions. I've had people, write me questions before, and if I have the time, I will certainly try and get back to them as soon as I can.
Oh, that's great. And you're also on Twitter, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I am on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. Twitter's a good way if you're just, I often tweet all day long different, either workplace or career advice, stories that I've seen as I look around, advice I feel like that is worthwhile. So, if you don't know where to start or where to look for career advice, just follow me on Twitter, and, I'll tweet you stories I think are helpful.
Oh, that's great. And what is your Twitter handle? I don't remember.
Anita Bruzzese.
Okay, great. Well, Anita, thank you so much for joining me today. This discussion.
Well, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it.
Yes, this discussion's been so helpful. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go out to iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.